Welcome to the Manders Mindset Podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Amanda's Mindset. As always, I'm your host, Amanda Russo, aka the Breathing Goddess, and I am here with a very special guest that I am thrilled to announce to you guys too. You might remember on episode 18, I spoke with Rob, and he mentioned this individual. He's a master story worker and a healthy holistic habits coach. He has been helping so many people transform their lives from their limiting beliefs to releasing and transforming their stories, from his friends to his clients and everybody in between. He has done over 1,000 storywork sessions. He has also co-hosted or hosted over 100 podcasts, and he's the co-host of the Get Enlifted Podcast. And I'm here with Dave Robinson today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's my fake laughs or claps and everything else. No, I'm really happy to be here and having this conversation with you. And thank you so much for the kind intro.
Thank you so much for being here. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave Robinson, I live in Richmond, Virginia. This is my hometown. I started off, I've always been an athlete my entire life. I've always been into personal development. I went to college to be a high school history teacher and decided with like weeks to go before I graduated that was not the path I was going to pursue. So I became a strength and conditioning coach at a D1 university. Spent a year working with football, men's soccer, women's soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, worked with youth athletes, had some personal training clients, and I was finding myself falling out of love with the gym and out of love with fitness and not making any money and being really burned out and having no flexibility. And so I got into financial planning for about 6 years, where I gained some flexibility, but continued to very much dislike my life on a day-to-day basis. And so I decided to get back into coaching full-time in 2017, and I've been a full-time coach since then. The past 4 years, I've been coaching almost exclusively story work. So I don't do any fitness coaching anymore. I hardly do any health coaching anymore. And now I focus primarily and exclusively on wellness, how you feel about yourself and about your life experience at any given moment in time. So I do that as a story work coach.
Can you explain a little bit about what storywork is?
Sure. So we all think and we use words to think, and we all speak. We use words to speak, and we write and we read, and those are relating to words as well. And the words that we use create the stories we tell ourselves, and those stories we tell ourselves create our belief systems and our perception of reality. So story work is a way to identify and then potentially alter or change the stories or the beliefs that we have about our past experiences, about our current day life situation and life experiences, and then what we want to do in the future. So as it turns out, many people use language that creates conflict internally and externally. Many people are unknowingly stuck in poor language patterns, which lead to poor physical patterns, which lead to being in a fight or flight stress response state for vast periods of their life. And storywork can help with all of those things, both past, present, and future.
Okay. Can you explain how you do the story work with your clients?
Absolutely. So we almost always are on Zoom, like you and I are right now, and on a Google document at the same time. So that Google Doc allows both myself and my clients to make changes and have them simultaneously show up on the screen. I tell every single one of my clients in the very first session that I do with them 3 things. The first is that if we get anything written down, aka from our brains, and put it onto the page or the Google Doc in front of us, type it out, it's a huge win for the day. It's a huge win. So that's one of the first ways in which story work can differ from other traditional therapeutic uh, um, modalities like therapy or like counseling, because we're not just talking about stuff, we're taking it from our heads and putting it onto the page, right? And if we do that, it's a big win. The second and third things that I tell every single one of my clients is, as a coach, I'm always going to shoot them straight, and ain't nobody ever going to hear about it, period. So we create the set and the setting to be able to have uh, not only a safe space, but a constructive and vulnerable and open and honest space. And we then go into any myriad number of stories. And Amanda, this can be past, things that we've experienced, things that were hurtful to us, things that were haunting to us. This can be present day, where we do the light wolf, dark wolf conversation, where we do identity work, where we do limiting beliefs, where we talk about where we're stuck, where we go into victim mentality. Or this can be future focused, where it typically encompasses a lot more than just goal setting. There's vision casting, there's perfect days, there's cost of inaction, there's fear setting exercises. There's so many future oriented stuff that we can do. But the crux and the core of this is, if we can get anything written down and put onto page, if we can get a title for that story, and if we can get it written out conversationally, we can, quote unquote, work the story. So that's typically 4 to 5 steps. Step 1 is writing and titling out the story. Step 2 is reading the story out loud. Step 3 is slowing down the pace of that read. So instead of flying through it really, really fast, like I'm talking right now, right? We slow down the rate of speech, and that typically allows some things to jump out at us that maybe we skipped over, or allows us to feel certain things that we didn't feel the first time when we were flying through the read. The 4th step is we add rhythmic, down-regulating breaths at various spots in the story. So that may look like where our inhales are shorter than our exhales, aka our exhales are longer than our inhales, to pull us even further down into that parasympathetic nervous system state, that rest and relax state. And once we do those 4 things, there's typically an entirely new perception of or relation to that story from when it was just floating around in our heads, or we had just written it out on the page. And then potentially we start to change some of the words or translate some of those words within the story to produce a different outcome or produce a different physiological feeling. So what ends up happening is that people, especially if we're dealing with things that are unpleasant or hurtful or haunting or stuck or, whatever it may be, people go from relating to that experience in a fight or flight manner, like a sympathetic nervous system response, to relating to that experience in the parasympathetic state, meaning they can actually store emotions, they can, their cells can heal, they can experience emotions, they can store memories, they can just be in a different place as it relates to that thing. Very broad scope, very large swath of things we can accomplish and cover with story work. It's incredibly versatile for someone that has ADD or ADHD like me. It's a different story almost every time, and I've seen a ton of things. I feel like I've seen it all just about, but there's a lot of patterns that come up with people with their stories, and that allows a coach to be able to decide what tool to use at any given point in time.
Okay. Why would you say it's a win to write down the story?
Because it takes us from being in the story to observing the story. So it's almost like, okay, here's a script for a movie, and you're the director and the main character, and you're playing out the scene. There's a difference between playing out the scene over and over and over again versus now you're sitting in the movie theater eating popcorn and soda pop and watching the scene that you played out on the screen. There's going to be a different relation to that scene. There's going to be a different response to that scene. You'll be able to observe a lot more from that perspective than if you were the main character of the main story and it's floating around in your head. So that's why it's a huge win to get anything written down, because we're taking it out of our heads from being in it to putting it on the page to observing it.
I love how you mentioned observing it, because that's been a pretty popular theme that a lot of guests have mentioned on my podcast about observing your life, taking a step back, and just looking at things as an outsider almost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's, think about how I thought about this the other day while I was driving, and I meant to write it down. Now that we're talking about writing stuff down, so I'm happy that I'm bringing this up because I just remembered it again. So this is good. I'm going to write this down this time, right? Every car, whether it's a junker beater car, whether it's a brand new truck, whether it's a Ferrari, the nicest race cars, they all have side view mirrors. They all have rear view mirrors, right? Because you can't see what you can't see. You just can't see what you can't see. And I feel like a lot of us are going around in our lives with our rear view mirrors chopped off or our side view mirrors chopped off. So we have these blind spots. And then we're like really just driving forward, staring into the rear view mirror, which does us no good at all. Right? We're looking at our past and all the stuff we messed up on, or all the stuff, oh, we should have done this, we should have done that. And it's like, well, let's use our eyes and look ahead where we're going to go, rear view mirror behind us. And then let's make sure that we utilize tools to take care of those blind spots that we have, maybe on the sides where we don't have that perception.
I love that analogy. I've never heard that before.
Me either. That's why I was stoked about it. I was like, hell yeah, I came up with some cool things,
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. So have you ever had a client you had a difficult time doing the story work session with?
I've had two clients I've had difficult times doing storywork sessions with, out of, like you said, 1,000+ sessions, close to 1,100 sessions. They were both very different people in very different circumstances. So I started my career, probably 350 of my first 500 sessions were in the addiction recovery community. And I worked for a home here in Richmond, Virginia, and it was it's called Starfish Recovery Home. And they started with one recovery home, and now they've got up to 4, 2 men's houses and two women's houses. And I had done some one-on-one individual work with the founder's wife, and we did 8 sessions together, cleared up a whole bunch of stuff. She got way more confident. She got way more focused, way less heavy, right? And she invited me in to do a group session with the folks at the first home, and that went really well. And then I was hired to work with all of their intensive patients one-on-one. So folks who, some of them wanted to be there, many of them did not want to be there. They were ordered to be there. It was like, hey, this or jail, or they're coming off a bond, and it's like, great, let's move into this place. Alcohol, heroin, cannabis, methamphetamines, everything in between, right? Many of those sessions were challenging, and many of those sessions were also incredibly rewarding because, for so many reasons, right? This is a big time thing with a lot of people, is going through addictions. And I haven't personally struggled with that, but I have very dear friends who have struggled with that for a long time, family members who have struggled with that for a long time. So it's near and dear to my heart, right? One individual in particular, on 2 sessions back to back in particular with the same person, not only did not want to be there, but also I think was actively in self-sabotage mode, and made things incredibly difficult for himself and me on the call, right? On the 2 calls together. So that was the first instance of like, okay, like 0% of this is landing. And I was able to not internalize that. I know, hey, that's most likely not on me, or the most of this is not on me. It's all good, right? And I did the best that I could. Cool, moved on. The second instance happened a couple months ago. So around, session 975 or something like that, right? And I had a referral to a very prestigious woman in our community who's the CFO of a Fortune 500 company, and she's very type A, very driven. We had a ton of resistance to even getting on the call, we finally got on the call and we're doing the session, and there was a ton of resistance to writing things down. In fact, she couldn't write anything down. She chose not to write things down. So I was like, okay, cool. We can still do this and not write stuff down. It'll be very difficult, but we'll figure it out. We'll work through it, which we did. And my sessions are typically 75 minutes because 60 minutes is too short and an hour and a half was too long. And we got right up around that 60-minute mark and still hadn't made progress, still hadn't turned a corner, still hadn't I felt given value or gotten value out of the particular session. And finally were able to identify a phrase in a story that was still holding some weight for her. And it happened to be around her self-worth and the fact that she had trouble thinking or saying the words, I love myself. So we got an exercise. I had her grab a pen and paper, and she did end up writing some stuff down. And we were able to, in the last couple minutes, turn a corner and go from not even being able to think those words to actually being able to say those words out loud and repeat them out loud and add some breath in between. And her reflection was that she felt much more calm. She felt much more clear. She felt much less anxiety in the moment. She felt like she could get a good breath in, which was very opposite of where she was feeling prior to the call. And it turned out to be a great benefit for her and to her. Both of those were close. I didn't know whether we'd actually get to that point with that woman a couple months ago, but we did. So 1,998 out of 1,100 sessions. There's, I don't think I even did that math wrong or whatever, but the vast majority of the time, 99.9% of the time, really great things happen for people.
Wow, that's amazing. How did you first discover story work?
So I first discovered story work. I first discovered words being powerful and thoughts being powerful back in 2015. I ran across the book Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Kamal Ravikant. And I was finding myself in a situation where I was saying and thinking, I hate myself all the time. And I hate my life and I hate this and I hate that. And it was in the middle of the financial planning days and my day-to-days were not fun. And his book is about changing those words to I love myself and saying what happens. And I did, and things got way better really quickly. It's like, that's cool, mind-blowing type thing, like we were talking about right before we hit record on the power of even changing one word, right? That went from hate to love and things got way better. So that was my first introduction to the power of words. And then I met the founder of Enlifted and Vocabulary, Mark England, at a networking event here in Richmond back in 2017. And we went out to grab some Thai food, afterwards and got to know one another over the course of 6 months. And we were having a beer at one point towards the end of 2017 together. And I was just, for lack of a better term, I was just bitching to him about the stuff that was going wrong in my life. I was venting, I was angry, I was upset. And he said, why don't we hop on a call next week, man? I'll send you some questions in a Google Doc. We'll do a little Zoom. It'll be really great. You'll write some things down, yada, yada, yada. And I got so much benefit out of that particular session and gave me so much clarity on leaving my financial planning career, on we changed what could go wrong to what could go right with this ultra marathon I had coming up, and that changed my outcome of the race and how I felt about it. And I just started from that moment on diving as deep as I could into the rabbit hole of story work and haven't stopped since.
Wow. Okay. So where did you go with story work from there? Did you get certified then? Did you?
So there wasn't a certification at that time. That was the end of 2017. I continued to go to various workshops that Mark hosted. A couple other folks in our community also that lived in town. Brandon Powell is a Wim Hof certified master instructor, and he actually certifies all the coaches in North America, which is super cool, or at least used to do that. So Brandon and Mark would put workshops on relatively frequently, and I would do my best to attend those and learn more about both breathing and breath work as well as its integration into words and stories. I actually was a part of the team that helped launch Enlifted at Paleo FX in Austin, Texas in 2019, which is was a very big health and wellness like mecca before COVID kind of blew that whole thing up. And then beginning of 2020, I actually moved to Mexico to open a health and wellness retreat with a former business partner. And we moved, it was 6 hours south of Cancun on the Yucatan Peninsula in this like sacred Mayan jungle. And we put a down payment on a big, um, compound and moved in. And my move-in date was, I moved to Mexico on March 3rd, 2020. And I moved into this compound on March 15th, 2020. And then COVID happened like 3 days later. Borders got shut. Everything blew up. Came back to my hometown. Lived in this dude's walk-in closet for the first month of COVID. Very tough times. And I was lamenting the loss of this dream and this opportunity that I had, while also not having a clear picture of what was going to happen next, because at the time I was personal training and weren't able to do that. Wasn't able to go into the gym. I had given up all my clients 3 months prior, because I was making this big move. And so at that point, there was a certification available, and I was invited into the cert, which I did. And within, the first 3 sessions, I had an entirely different outlook on where I was and what I had been through and where I was going. And I committed to doing 1,000 sessions on May 20th of 2020 and accomplished that on September 30th of 2023. And so since that very moment, halfway through that particular cert, I was like, I'm going to do this professionally and I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I've got a goal of 10,000 sessions now, which is going to take me a while, but it's all good. It's my 25-year goal. So.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. What made you set the goal of 1,000?
I was encouraged to set the goal of 1,000. 100 was, still getting my feet wet. 500 is, it's still a hobby. 1,000 is mastery, and 10,000 is, the greatest of all time. So I'm aiming for the GOAT status, but the mastery was something that I greatly desired. I had on my wall as part of my identity, I'm a world-class storywork coach, and that it took me a while. It was very far out when I put it down on the page, and it took me a while to get to the point where I feel like I could embody that identity and be solid in that identity. And that's something that I still hold very close and dear.
Wow. Would you say it was challenging for you to do over 1,000 sessions?
There were aspects of it that was challenging. The marketing and sales aspect wasn't something I particularly enjoyed, or up until this past calendar year, something that I put much effort into. So it was often a challenge to get butts in seats, so to speak. The magnitude of it from a time perspective is a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort. And I do feel extremely blessed that this is the thing I love to do. This is the thing that drives my economic engine. And this is the thing that I feel like I was born for, created for, or could one day be the best in the world in. And so it doesn't feel like work. It feels like, I'm able to have conversations with people and drastically and positively impact their lives in a very short period of time. And that's freaking cool. So, if I just had people showing up and I could run 6 sessions a day, 5 days a week for moving forever, that'd be great. Sign up for that all day long, so working up to that point.
That's amazing. So you mentioned about embodying this identity of a master story worker. Were there certain things that helped you be able to embody this identity?
Reps. Yeah, I call them the chops, like chopping on wood. right? Chopping down a tree. It's like each hack is a rep, and so if we're the reps mattered the most. Um, Not only the reps of doing the thing, but the reps of telling myself I was good at doing the thing. And also receiving the feedback that, hey, you're really good at doing this thing. And those three things combined over and over and over and over and over again led to me being able to fully step into that identity of being a world-class storywork coach, and a master storywork coach. And ultimately, I could say it all day long. Like right now, my identity that's on the board is I'm a world-class business owner, and I'm nowhere close to that. I'm not there at all. But beginning of last year, I was a very shitty business owner, and now I put myself at a average to below average business owner. But that's a big progression, and I'm really proud of that progression over the past year. In 2023, my goal is to be an above average business owner, or 2024 rather. And so being able to work up towards that with various reps by doing the things that that particular identity entails, um, by receiving feedback and giving myself objective and constructive feedback, and all those things will continue to build towards that identity. And maybe it'll be I know it when I get there. Maybe it'll be the numbers on the accounting sheet, or whatever it is. But that's now that next goal of mine from an identity perspective.
Mm, okay. Would you say you would have been able to embody that identity without those three things?
No.
Why?
Um, the reps, you can't be good at something if you don't do it a lot. Uh, Writing it down, like maybe I would have gotten there eventually, but I don't know if I wasn't like looking at it and staring at it and working towards it. I don't know whether I would even know if I got there or not. It'd be like, yeah, I would just drive in the car without a map. And it's like, hey, I don't even know whether I got to my destination because like I didn't have a destination in the first place, So I would say that those two factors alone are vital in me accomplishing that particular goal.
Okay. So you talked about goals and identity based goals, and you mentioned a little bit about the time frame of it. Would you say there should be a time frame when setting goals, or no?
Yes, and right. So, one of my favorite quotes is by Tim Ferriss. There's no such thing as an impossible goal or dream, merely an impossible timeline or unrealistic timeline. And my first goal was I'm going to do 1,000 sessions by January 1st of 2021. It was like 6 months later after I set the goal. Like, nope, didn't get that. Got like 275 sessions in. It's like, okay, now I'm going to do it by, December 31st of 2021. I'll give myself another year. And it's like, nope, didn't make it. 2023. Nope, not in the beginning of the year. Okay, 9 months into 2023. Cool. Then I accomplished it. So it was good to give me the push, but it also, I wasn't attached to the outcome of the time frame of that goal. So I'll give you another example. I live on a third of an acre here with my fiance Ruslana. We are into permaculture techniques. So we do, we've got a little mini homestead. We raise rabbits. We've got gardens, and I've got compost piles, and I've got all kinds of different little projects going, yada yada. And a big goal of ours is to have 100 acres in the mountains of Virginia somewhere, 2 hours, 3 hours west of here, and build up, that site as being our, next, like the permanent permaculture spot. And that's a main goal of ours. And I've just viewed that as being inevitable without putting a timeline on it. So I'm pushing for it. I'm gunning for it this year, right? 2024 is a great year. We'll take massive steps towards that goal. Is it going to happen? Like, I don't know. Like stretch goal, yeah. Like minimum floor goal, like no. It's somewhere in between. So okay, it'll be 2025. that it happens, or it'll be 2026 that it happens, or it'll be 2030 that it happens, and I'll be 40 years old and it happens as opposed to 36. And like, okay, fine. Like, still gonna happen. I know that it's inevitable. I know that it's in my future. I see it. I've cast the vision. I I rep the vision. I'm doing what I can now with what I have now to get closer to that goal. Uh, and I'm very happy with where I am as well, which I think is the key part because that allows you to maintain that happiness as you're on the path of achieving the thing you really wanted to achieve. And so I view it as a process, and I view those timelines as malleable and also important because it gets you to the start line.
That makes sense. Okay. So I'm curious. You don't have as much of a time frame on the homestead goal, but you had more of a time frame on the reps goal. Is there a
Mhm.
reason for that?
I think part of it was some naivety as far as like how quickly I could turn it around and make it happen. If I put a time frame on the homestead goal, like I'm going to do it by the end of this year, like I don't know whether I would accomplish it or not. Like my gut tells me like you probably won't get it by the end of this year. Like a lot of things would have to go really, really, really well in order for that to happen. And it doesn't mean that it won't go really, really well. It's just that all of the stars would have to align if I put that goal on it. So then if I said, okay, by the end of next year, like, okay, yeah, now that feels a little bit better, but it doesn't change my process. It doesn't change what I'm going to do. It doesn't change what I'm going to focus on. Um, the currency of land is dollars. And for me to do the thing that I want to do, I get to build up more of those dollars to be able to do that thing. And with the amount of dollars I have right now, I ain't buying a 100-acre property in the mountains of Virginia. And so, I could say, hey, I'm going to do that tomorrow, all I want, and it's just not going to happen. And so I think that I didn't know what it would take to build a storywork business to the point to do 1,100 sessions. And so I set ambitious and unrealistic goals on the way. And again, I just pushed them back as time went on. Um, when I got close enough to it, when I got into the 900s, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this before the end of the year. Like that's the goal of mine. And so then I started to dial that in once I knew it was achievable and accomplishable. So
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you weren't attached to the outcome. Do you have any suggestions for anybody to not be attached to the outcome of a goal they might have or a time frame for said goal?
I think if it's like adjacent, being okay with it being adjacent, right? So I did a perfect day exercise, which was one of my favorite exercises to do back in 2016 or 2017. And I lived my perfect day in Mexico. But in my original exercise, I was in Costa Rica with, a different group of friends doing a different thing. But in reality, it's like the feeling was the thing I was desiring. And like, it didn't matter that it was Mexico versus Costa Rica. It didn't really matter that it was this group versus that group. It didn't really matter that it was, you know, uh, mountain biking through the jungle as opposed to surfing on the waves in the ocean. Like it was the feeling of that thing, that future, that perfect day that is what mattered. And so I think that's where the kind of giving up to God or the universe or whatever, the how and the specifics, and more going towards the vibes of the feeling. So, for example, if it's a 40-acre homestead in the mountains of Tennessee, like great, all good. Right? Doesn't have to be exactly the thing. If Rue and I decide to move to Greece and we go on a little island in Greece and now it's, we're building a little homestead there instead. Like, great, awesome. Like I imagine the feeling is going to be similar to the thing that we are desiring, which is time and location freedom in a beautiful place, not in a main city that allows us to have goats and horses and grow our own food and, live a simple and sustainable life. Like that's the goal. And the how and the specifics like don't even really matter, but it gives me something to aim for. So that's why I put them in.
Wow. Okay. I love all that. Love all that. How you mentioned not too specific, but the feeling.
Mhm.
Okay. Wow. Now I want to switch topics a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh, but you've mentioned this on a few different podcasts, and I'm really hoping you'll explain it. You might already know what I'm referring to, but I had never heard of this. But you talked about something called the hedgehog concept.
Mhm.
Can you
Absolutely.
explain that?
Yeah, I teased it earlier when I said story work is fulfills three different things for me. And it's actually more than that. But the hedgehog concept is something by Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. And he and his team examine how businesses go from, like the book title suggests, from good to great and enduring, and iconic, right? I took that concept and applied it not to a big business, but applied it to my life. Right. So Dave, and this is how I work with this with my clients as well, is it typically revolves around vocation or passion or profession, right? But story work for me is my hedgehog. And story work is something that I love to do. It's not something that I just like to do. It's not something that I just do because I'm good at it. It's like, no, I love to do it. It drives my economic engine or fills my economic reservoir, aka I make the money I need to make and want to make by doing it. And the third and most critical piece, and the most rare, hard to find, or valuable piece, is it's also something I feel like I was born for, created for, or could one day be the best in the world at it. And when I looked at the previous careers or jobs or occupations or identities that I held, none of those got anywhere close. Some had aspects of it. The financial planning, I didn't love it. I didn't like it. I was good at it. I made the money I needed to make, but I sure as heck wasn't born for it, created for it, nor did I have any desire to be the best financial planner in the world. Okay. That's just not it, right? Fitness, training, I loved it. I didn't make good money doing it or enough money doing it. And I could name 100 trainers who are better than me, who just like, and they always will be better than me. And I don't want to be the best personal trainer in the world. I just never really had a desire to do that. And so I was like, okay, health, right? Loved it. Did make more money from it, but like, I'm not going to go back to school and get a PhD in cellular biology, or I'm not going to like become a health influencer. And, like, it's just not what I was born for or created for, but the story work piece that checked off so many boxes so instantly for me that once I started to get those reps in, and once I got those reps in, and once I embodied that identity of the world-class storywork coach, and once I looked at the quote unquote the competition, or the other individuals who are, working in this capacity, and I examined where I was and the results that I got and how I felt about getting them, and et cetera, et cetera. The fact that I'm going to do this for the rest of my life and I know that, cool. That was Now I'm able to check that box and have this be my hedgehog, which means I can lean into it so much more, which means I can embody all those different aspects, and Mark's the greatest to do it right now. He just had a head start, so I'm gunning, I'm coming for it. And it's really cool to be able to have that long-term goal, and that not only the goal to just do something, but to try to be the best at that thing. And I haven't had that before in other goals or in other aspects of my life. And so it means that it's deeply meaningful to pursue that that path.
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned it in terms of vocation or passion. Do you have any suggestions for anybody who feels like they might be struggling to find their passion?
Change the words. Find a passion. Where are you even gonna look for that? Like, it's a needle in the haystack type analogy, that I see. Oh, like every single one of these straws are a potential passion, and I gotta go find the needle in here and find the right straw that works for me. It's like, that's tough. So if we swap the word find for the word create, hey, I'm gonna create my passion. Okay. Now we got a little bit of a different outcome. We've got a little bit of a different feeling. We've actually got some direction, right? Um, I fast forwarded in my life numerous times, both as a financial planner, both as a fitness professional, back when I was coaching. Let's fast forward like 30 years, and I try to project the outcome of my life, right? And the best result was in financial planning, I was going to have a B minus life because I would have time and I would have money, but I wouldn't have been making the impact. And I would just on a day to day not be enjoying what I was doing. But I could retire kind of early and have nice things and yada, yada. But like that was a B minus existence. Really, truly was. Um, Projecting forward with story work, it's A plus 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 plus, and that's where I feel now. That's where I feel like I'm going to go. But I had to examine and do a whole bunch of things and try a whole bunch of things to try to create that passion or find that passion, so to speak, before I got here, before I came across this path and this opportunity. So something else that may be valuable for listeners is identifying the things leading up to that hedgehog, right? So let's start at the other end of the spectrum. Hobby. I've played soccer since I was 3 years old. Right? For a long time, I wanted to be a professional soccer player, but I did not know what that took. I wasn't good enough. I negotiated the price of doing that thing, and I didn't want it badly enough. Right. So I didn't do the things that I probably needed to do or whatever. Looking back on, I was playing video games too much with my buddies as opposed to like kicking a ball against the wall to make my touch better. So like now I pay to play soccer. So let's look at the criteria again. Like, I love it. Great. I feel like I was born to do it. I love the game. The game is an incredible game. I'm always going to play. I'm always going to be involved. But it doesn't drive my economic engine. And I sure as heck am never going to be the best in the world at it. So it's a hobby. It's something I love to do that I pay to do. I had a job in high school and in college. In high school, I worked at a country club as the towel guy. Right, I drove towels back and forth from the pool to the laundry machine. Yeah, high stuff. In college, I worked at the library, and I did that so that I could have access to the documents and the PubMed stuff and all the different journals and stuff for strength and conditioning because that was a big hobby of mine. But a job was I got paid for the time that I spent. There's a billion different jobs out there. You can work at Starbucks. You can work at Target. You could be a delivery guy. You can do that and the other, right? You can always quit and get a job. You can always find another job. It's time for money. A career is one job over a long period of time. And a vocation is one job over a long period of time that you love to do. Right? So, being a lawyer or an attorney is a career. If you absolutely love it, then maybe that's your vocation. If you hate it, you can quit and get a job, and you're still probably going to have a hobby. You probably don't practice law as a hobby. Probably do some other things. Somebody has to be the best attorney in the world. And so for somebody, being a lawyer or an attorney is their hedgehog. They were born for it. They were created for it. They could be the best in the world at it or the best in the world at it now. Makes the money they need to make. They love it. They do it all the time, et cetera, et cetera. For most people, like my dad, for example, is a lawyer with the county that we live in, or they still live in, Chesterfield County. It's his career. It's his vocation because he's good at it. I don't think he loves it. I think there's nothing else that he would, could do necessarily or like would want to do, but when he retires, it's going to be the best day of his life, So he could always quit and get a job, but there's that trade-off. And so I think with people who are listening to this, like you got to try a bunch of stuff and you got to really ask yourself some deep, honest, constructive questions of like, hey, is this thing that I'm doing like what I really want to be doing? Because if you change out the word time for the word life, you're going to get a different feeling. Hey, I'm wasting my life versus I'm wasting my time. I'm spending my life going to this job versus, I spend my time going to this job. I trade my life for money. I trade my time for money. Like, whoa, those are entirely different outcomes when you really think about it. So I don't like wasting time, AKA I don't like wasting my life personally. So things that do not, if it doesn't fall into that love to do category, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. AKA I'm not going to spend a lot of life on it.
Wow. Wow. So I'm still yet again blown away by the shift of one word. We were talking about that before recording, and even again with when I said find your passion versus create your passion, completely different,
Mm-hmm.
completely different. Or with time and life, and that still blows me away. That just shifting one word can change the feeling, the meaning, the way it sounds, everything about what you're saying. Wow. I'm still blown away at that. I really am.
That's one of my favorite translations, and we just did a translation. We didn't change it from English to French or Spanish to Arabic or whatever, but we changed the fundamental outcome by changing the words. And one of my favorite translations is time to life, because it provides an entirely different perspective on this experience that we're living in this 3D reality. We're in these meat suits with the soul that is inside of it, and like what we do from age birth 0 to, death and whatever happens next, right? Like that length of time is our life, and how we use and spend our time is how we use and spend our life. And I realized a couple years ago I was doing things that I hated to do, that I didn't have to do. And so I stopped doing them, and my life instantly got better. And then I was like, whoa, what if I did more things that I love to do and was more intentional about that? Like, my life instantly got better, right? And it's like, oh, okay, like, what if instead of trading time for dollars, doing something that I wasn't really good at or didn't love, I created a way to get paid to do the thing that I love and that I'm good at? Like, that's a good use of my life. That's a good use of my time, And so again, it leads to way more satisfaction, way more happiness, way less stress, way less. I mean, it's simple, but it's also like, I feel like I'm fighting the good fight by doing that, in a lot of different ways.
Wow. It's so wild to me because you hear everybody will talk about how powerful words are and how powerful thoughts are and how words are spells, but it's so mind-blowing to me that shifting or changing one word changes so much.
Mm-hmm.
It changes so much. So you mentioned you were doing a lot of stuff you hated doing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to realize that you hated what you were doing?
When I was in my financial planning world, I got bit by a spider and it put me in the hospital for 3 days. And it was like Saturday night, 1 a.m. turned to Sunday morning at 1 a.m. or whatever. And like the nurse had just woken me up, and I was, they had figured out what it was, and I wasn't going to die or anything. I never was going to die, but it was scary for a little bit. It was it was my first like medical emergency. It was the first time I was like, whoa, like I'm incapacitated. Like my health really matters, like, wow. And I had the realization that it had turned from Saturday night to Sunday morning. And then I thought, oh, that means I got to go to work on Monday. Maybe I'll just stay here another day. And it was like, that's a sign that I would rather stay in the hospital bed for. It was like a lightning bolt, like struck my brain. It was like, dude, what are you doing? You got to get out. Like, this is, you'd rather stay here than go to work at my own firm. It's not like I was working for somebody else. It was like, I'd just go, into my own office and do this thing. And I hated it. And I was using my logical brain to override my heart and my gut, because logically I put so much time into this, I put so much effort into this, I built up the business, I was making some money, et cetera, et cetera. But my feeling, my heart was that I didn't like it, and my gut knew it wasn't good for me, and I was overriding those things with my logical brain. And that's where the lightning bolt came in and hit, right? That led to a different outcome. That led to me setting a date to leave the firm and go back into coaching fitness, which was the thing that I the only other thing that I knew or felt like I would be good at without going and getting another job. So that was the first moment. The second moment, I experienced a very bad back injury in March of 2019, which was my first major injury. Like broken bones, broken collarbone, broken wrist, done some ankle things, like luckily my knees are great, knock on wood, but like the back was the first thing that is like, whoa, okay. And again, I'm incapacitated. I can't pick up a pencil. My identity was challenged. And then I came back too soon and I had a setback. The initial injury was like a 9 out of 10, and the setback was like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. And it was like, okay, I have to change a lot of things in order for this to get better and not become a chronic thing. Because I had been dealing with some things leading up to that for a while. So I examined what I was doing and how I was living my life. And I realized that I was burning the candle at both ends. And I was not prioritizing myself. I wasn't prioritizing my sleep. I was doing way too many things. I had way too many balls in the air that I was trying to juggle. And I actually made a love to do, hate to do, have to do list that was sort of like a start stop list. And the first step of that was that I just wrote down everything that I did on a weekly basis. And it was like 3 pages, single spaced. I was just like flying through all the different tasks, all the different identities, all the different just stuff that I did or felt like I quote unquote had to do, the things that I was doing repeatedly. I wrote them down. And then I put them on the category of the love to do side or the hate to do side. And if it was something that I have to do, I put it in the middle. And so my strategy was that the love to do stuff I was going to do more of. The hate to do stuff, I was just going to eliminate it immediately. And the have to do stuff, I was going to either try to find a way to do it or delegate it. So what I found was that in the hate to do side, I had the 6 a.m. Wednesday workout. So for a couple of years, I ran a free group workout called Hump Day Hills, and I did it at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. at a park about 20 minutes away, Libby Hill Park here in Richmond, Virginia. And the 6 p.m. one got a lot more attendance than the 6 a.m. one. Every morning and 5 a.m., every Wednesday morning, I'd wake up, I was pissed. Tuesday night going to bed, I was pissed. I didn't want to do it, didn't want to be there, didn't want to get up in the cold, didn't want to get up early, didn't want to drive and lug all this shit out there, didn't want to have to pay the toll, didn't want to have to stand there in case people didn't come, didn't want to have to come back. Was the whole thing, hated it. And I had a bunch of stories in my head about what would happen if I quit or stopped doing it. And the reality is hardly any of those things happened. I made the announcement that afternoon, effective immediately. We won't be doing Hump Day Hills in the morning anymore at 6 a.m. Please join us for the 6 p.m. I got a couple emails of like, oh, this is a bummer. One person quit. 3 people just started showing up to the 6 p.m. as opposed to the 6 a.m. And my life immediately got better because I took off this huge thing I didn't want to do that was affecting me negatively. And I just stopped doing it right then and there, great, check. The love to do, I started doing more of, great, check. And so all of these were ways that I was able to realize things that were important to me, things that weren't important to me, and started to prioritize my time, aka my life, to make the decision that would best suit me over time.
Wow. Okay. So now, when you mentioned you were noting like what you have to do, what you love to do, were you doing this in like a full day, like observing what you do each day, or was it general? Like, how did you go about that?
I got very granular and specific, so it was like I looked more into like the tasks that I was doing, so it was like, okay, like I'm posting for my social media. I'm creating a post and posting for the business's social media. I'm writing the email newsletter for this. I'm facilitating the personal training sessions. I'm facilitating the 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Hump Day Hills workouts on Wednesdays. I've got my own workout to do. I got to see my family on Thursday nights, like just listed out all the things. I think I was looking at my calendar and like all of my to-dos, all of my tasks, all of my calendar things. I was recording podcasts, all the different things, as you know, that like goes into the podcast recording. It's not just hitting record. It's like scheduling guests and scheduling editing the actual show and putting in the intro and putting in the outro, putting in the show notes and getting it onto Simplecast and like all of that stuff, I was doing, right? And so it just turned out to be a ton of things that, I didn't feel like I wanted to do anymore.
Okay. Now, when you did this audit per se, were you surprised at anything that you noted that you hated doing?
I think I was surprised more so at the amount of things that I hated to do versus like any particular thing or task. I realized that I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I love to do nearly as often as I could. And there were very few things on the have to do pile. So ultimately, we have societal or cultural or physical expectations of the things I have to do that. Like, you don't have to do that. You can not do it. You could do more of it. You could do something different. You can do something adjacent to it. All those things are typically just stories. And so I realized I had a lot of stories going on as far as what I was doing on a regular basis.
Okay. So would you say you used story work yourself to,
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. And I hired coaches. I took a ton of trainings. I have my own coach. I also have some colleagues that I go to that if I, nowadays, if I have to work a story, I got a buddy that I call and he does the same thing, for me. I'll work his stories for free anytime and vice versa, I hired a business coach 3 weeks ago and we spent 2 days together, 2 full days, and it was a lot of money, but it's going to help a ton because I just got to the end of my ability to affect myself on my path to being a world-class business owner. Like I needed some help to go from A to B, and so I asked for it, paid for it, received it, and I'm implementing it, so definitely had my own stories. Definitely worked my own stories.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So you talked a lot about identities. And I'm wondering if you have any advice about letting go of identities.
It's tough. It's tough to do. Break down the word identity. It's an I entity. It's like I being, and we can shift identities at any time, but a lot of times there's a lot of history to them. I think it's very valuable to differentiate who you've been, who you are now, and who you're becoming. And that's one of my favorite story work exercises is write out who you've been, write out who you are now, write out who you're becoming, and realize that we're the only ones that can define ourselves. We're the only ones that can sing our own praises, and we're the only ones that can tell ourselves who or what we can or can't be, right? We can do anything we want in this world, just not everything we want in this world. And so that identity is a crux factor in what we do, who we become, who we are.
Okay. I love how you mentioned you can do anything but not everything. I heard that somewhere, and that's something I've had to tell myself a lot. I've tended to be the type of person to say yes to everything, overextending myself in any way I can, basically. But I completely agree with that. You can do anything, but not everything.
Well, I think it also helps to allow us to understand where to spend our time or where to spend our life. And that, if we do one thing, like if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else for that time frame, and priorities, so like if I wanted to be a rocket scientist, like I suck at math, right? Like it would take so much for me to like stop this train and turn the direction and get on an entirely different track, an entirely different train. But if I dedicated my life and my heart and my soul and put everything I have into it by 65, maybe I could be a rocket scientist. Sure. But I can't like be a rocket scientist and these other things. And some of these other things will most likely come way easier to me than becoming a rocket scientist, And so you can do anything. Like I could do it. I truly believe I could do it, but I can't do everything. And so that is so far down on my list of things that I want to do that I can assure you, listener, I will not be a rocket scientist. It just ain't gonna happen, So, and I'm totally okay with that.
No, I completely get that. I completely get that. I like how you mentioned it's a yes to something, but it's a no to something else. Can't remember where I heard that, but I heard something similar. It's at least a no to everything else right now. Whatever you're saying,
Yep.
yes. And that also
Absolutely.
reminds me.
And
So go ahead.
no, you do it.
I was going to say that reminds me of the quote, and I don't know who this is from, but full of a lot of quotes. But I heard somewhere that you are one decision away from a completely different life.
Yep. Speaking of shedding identities, do you know the Latin root of the word decide? It's to cut off, to decide, to make a decision is to cut off. And typically we don't decide and add things. We decide and don't do things, cut things off, right? So I've decided to run 100-mile ultramarathon next year. And so I'm deciding, I'm cutting off a lot of my remaining vices and poor habits and leaning into discipline and consistency of a lot of different things. So I'm cutting off the Sunday night ice cream trip. I'm cutting off my cannabis use for a calendar year, right? I'm cutting off, not prioritizing my sleep every night. 9 nights out of 10, I get 9+ hours of sleep, but that 10th night screws me up for 2 or 3 days. If I stay out late or if I'm not prioritizing it. And if I want to accomplish this big goal that I have, right? And so you make a decision, you decide, means you're cutting off other things to do something that matters to you.
Wow. I did not realize the root of that. That actually reminds me of Sean and I have talked a lot about priorities. Mm-hmm. And we actually did a lot of work because I was struggling with prioritizing everything or trying to prioritize everything. And him and I worked through a lot how there's different seasons of life. And during this season of my life, fitness might be a big priority. Whereas during this other season, maybe something else is a big priority. And you can't, well, you can, but it is much more difficult to prioritize and pour fully into everything.
Yep.
Not going to be as successful.
Some things have to give. You might even be able to put a 9 out of 10 on 2 different things, but you can't put a 9 out of 10 on 5 different things, right? You probably only have 20 points. If you want to spend 18 out of 20 on 2 out of your 5 buckets, well, then, other things are gonna fall, right?
No, that is completely true. So what's one piece of advice, any type of advice you can share with the listeners?
So many pieces of advice. Do what you really want to do. Find a way to do what you really want to do. There is such a massive difference in this world between being fulfilled versus satisfied. It's a massive difference. A lot of people, I think, are satisfied with life, and very few people are fulfilled. And I can tell you that fulfilled is way better than satisfied.
What would you say is the difference between fulfilled and satisfied?
Satisfied to me is like, okay, yeah, that's good. It's a satisfying meal, right? Like it checked the boxes. I'm no longer hungry. Tasted pretty good, right? Full versus like fulfilling meal, like a fulfilling experience versus satisfying experience, is like one is like okay or like up to expectations, and the other is like uh the goal. The other is like the end product of most of our desires is to have an existence that's fulfilling, that is life giving, that is um, happy and comfortable, but not comfortable because of ease, comfortable because of the feeling you get when you're doing it. And typically that comes from doing hard things, that fulfillingness that comes with hard things. Satisfactory might be doing the easy thing and having it be comfy. Fulfilling is doing the hard thing and having that be the cause and the source of happiness. And I think there's just two different outcomes. So aim for fulfilling versus satisfied.
Okay. You mentioned something in there that about doing the hard things. What would you say the purpose is in doing hard things?
Mental growth, physical change, and spiritual progression and fulfillment.
Okay. Would you say you do something hard every day?
I do things that are hard 5 times a week, 4 to 5 times a week. I do things that are consistent. I consistently work towards things most every day. And again, in the definition there, I had a 6+ year streak of expressing myself physically every day. And when I started it, I went 73 days and then missed a day, and it failed in 2015. My goal was to work out every day in 2015. And so workout, that's doing something hard. And it was too much mentally, physically, my body, and I did not accomplish that goal, right? And then I fell off the wagon because I wasn't strong and didn't have a core why, and I didn't have my identity set. So about a year later, I changed the definition and I said, hey, I'm going to make a concerted effort to set aside time to better myself physically every day. That was my definition. And I did that for over 6 years. It was over 1,800 days. And some days that would be a walk around the block. Some days that would be 25 push-ups before bed. Most days that was a quote unquote a workout, something hard, or something productive in that manner. And so most of the time I was doing something hard, but I didn't need to do something hard every day to reach my goal. I needed to do something every day to reach my goal, but it didn't have to be hard. So I think that, and that doesn't need to be physical, like right now, like me doing my outreaches or like writing this damn email newsletter, like that's hard to me right now, and so I have great resistance to doing that. And so if I get any of that stuff done, like cool, I'm checking the box, I'm doing the hard thing for the day. Now it's easy for me to go and like run my miles because I love it and that's my big goal and I'm motivated and energized for it. And I could also just like sit in the sauna, or I can also just take a rest day, or I can also like write my emails later, whatever it may be. So I'm not, again, attached to having to do something hard every single day.
No, I get that. Okay. I was just curious, but no, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to switch topics a little bit. But you've told me how you have co-hosted or been on over 100+ podcasts, which is so fascinating to me. I'm just curious if you can touch a little bit upon when you started hosting podcasts, how you got into that, and wherever you want to take that.
I started with the GS Nation podcast back in 2018, which is not, the business is not alive anymore. The podcast is not alive anymore. I took down the RSS feed, but I, with my business partner, I co-hosted 60+ episodes with her on the GS Nation podcast, right? And been a couple years just being guests on other people's shows, and then had the opportunity to co-host the Get Enlifted podcast. Probably been on 30+ shows with Kim Kesting and Chase Tollison for Enlifted. I also co-host the Serious Fun podcast, which we've put out a dozen days with. Brooks Meadows is the main co-host and the producer of that show. And that's where we talk about all the stuff that gets us banned on Instagram. And we get to talk about it there, which is really great. So that's about 100 podcasts I've co-hosted. Plus I hosted rather, for a year. I did Work Your Stories Wednesdays on the Aux podcast, which was a daily show that my friend Zach Grossfeld of Auxoro, the Auxoro podcast, put on. So it was his second podcast. So I got to do that solo. Those were typically between 5 and 15 minutes. And I recorded them out on a walk and came back in, and, it was all story work related. So that's probably 150 shows I've hosted or co-hosted, and then been on 75, close to maybe 100 other podcasts as a guest, which has been super awesome. I've lost track of a lot of those. And unfortunately, my name is somewhat popular in terms of like Dave Robinson. It's not John Smith, but it also, ain't incredibly unique either. And so there's a bunch of those out there. So if I search that, it's just like, I got to do a lot of digging to find all the various shows that I've been on and whatnot. But, yeah, it's something that I really love to do. Like, we've had a lovely conversation. Time has flown by, and it's something that is like, I view it as impactful, and I don't know who's listening to this on the other end of the line, but one of my favorite things to do is get an email or an Instagram DM or like something. It's like, hey, I heard you on XYZ show or podcast. Like, I really liked ABC, like that is super cool for me as a person, and a professional. So if you're listening and you want to drop me a line, please do so. I'd be thrilled to receive it.
Awesome. That's great. So I'm wondering, what would you say is your favorite part about story work?
The light bulb moment.
Okay.
The moment that somebody gets it and you can feel, and they can feel that the trajectory is going to change. Like, I know the trajectory is going to change, and that might be a 1 degree change, and that might be a whole 180, but it's like something's going to be different, and it happened in that moment. And like, that's the coolest part for me.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. So what would you say is your favorite quote and why?
Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. It's by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And I think it's a reminder to breathe. So in between stimulus, what happens to us, response, how we react to that thing, there's a space. And all of mindset training, all of doing hard things, all the ice baths, all the story work, that it just allows us to expand out that space or expand that wedge between something that happens and how we respond. And in that space, in that wedge, we can choose how we're going to react. And if you take a breath in between, you're going to react in an entirely different way. And how you react is going to change the outcome of your life over and over and over again. So you can take that and run with it in 1,000 different directions, but that's the one that's my screensaver on my computer and has been there for years and years. And I just gifted my dad Man's Search for Meaning for Christmas, like 3 days ago. So it's very present in my life.
Wow, I love that. That's amazing. So, Dave, I'm curious, is there anything I didn't ask you, anything we didn't touch upon that you wished we would have?
This was wide ranging. I think you crushed it. I know you crushed it. Yeah, we got into all the good stuff: words, stories, breath, personal, professional. We talked about the homestead a little bit. Everything was awesome. So I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
I appreciate you chatting with me. Thank you so much. So I typically end the podcast with a question that's not from me because I wanted to approach it with a little outsider perspective.
Cool.
So I asked my best friend to come up with a question I could ask the guest. And her question is what has been the best decision you've made in your life and why?
Asking my girlfriend to marry me a couple months ago in Santorini, Greece. And we were on the same page and on the same team beforehand. And it's just only solidified that way more than anything else. And very cliche and colloquial, phrase, when you know. And I always thought that was BS, but it actually is very true. So lean into that. And that's by far the best decision.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And where can the listeners find you and connect with you?
So I'm on Instagram at daverobinson.coach, daverobinson.coach, which is actually where we got connected from, which is very cool. And people can find me online. My website is workyourstories.com, workyourstories.com.
Thank you so much. And I will link all of Dave's info in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the podcast, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda. You rock. Can't wait for this to come out.
You do too. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.